How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about who might be the biggest potential threat to the Lakers. After coming off of winning an NBA championship, there are a lot of teams that have made improvements to try and dethrone them, but which team really has the highest likelihood of actually beating them? We'll go over which teams I believe have the highest chance of being able to do it. And that will be a lot easier said than done. While there are a number of teams around the league that did get better, the Lakers arguably did too. They made a few surprising changes to their team and added a few noteworthy players that could help make them even better. And when they still have LeBron and Anthony Davis, adding guys like Dennis Schroder and Montrezl to their team can make them even more unbeatable. They weren't even taken to a Game 7 in the entire 2020 NBA playoffs, and it's not like they had a cakewalk to getting to the NBA Finals or winning the NBA Finals, as they arguably had to beat the two hottest teams in the league at the time with the Miami Heat and the Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets were rolling after coming back from being down 3-1 against the Clippers, and not to mention that Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic were on an absolute tear at the time. While they both played well against the Lakers, they didn't look nearly as dominant as they did before. And then the NBA Finals, they of course matched up with the Miami Heat, who dominated their way to the NBA Finals too. And one could argue that they would have made it a much more difficult series if Bam Adebayo had not gotten hurt, but the only player on their team that really looked good the whole time in the NBA Finals was Jimmy Butler. Other guys like Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson completely disappeared in a couple of games. Overall, the Lakers were dominant and made other teams who looked well at the time not so good. But are there any teams who will likely make it harder for them this year? There likely could be, and we'll start by looking at a few teams from the Western Conference, as these will be the teams that they will have to get through in order to even make it back to the NBA Finals. And the first team that we'll look at that I believe has a shot at giving them trouble is the Portland Trail Blazers. For some of you, this may come as a shock, but if you follow what they did during the offseason, you'll know why I consider them an actual threat. They didn't add another star player or anything, but they legitimately added a lot of underrated talent to their team. And one guy that they added who actually gave the Lakers a lot of trouble in the playoffs was Robert Covington. I thought Covington was a great addition to their team, and one that really gave them exactly what they needed. Portland often had to win by purely outscoring their opponent last year due to not having many high-level defenders or much depth. They relied heavily on Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum to put up big scoring numbers every night for them to win. But now, with adding guys like Covington, who is a great defender and a very versatile one too, along with adding or getting back underrated players like Harry Giles, Derrick Jones Jr., and Rodney Hood among others, they fixed a lot of the problems their team had last year. And they did all of that while being able to retain their key role players from last year like Carmelo Anthony, Gary Trent Jr., Zach Collins, and Anthony Simons. I don't think anyone should underestimate Portland. It wasn't that long ago that they themselves made it to the Western Conference Finals. If they can stay healthy and have a full year with Yusuf Nurkic, Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, and Robert Covington on the floor together, I think they could become a very dangerous team. Definitely look out for Portland. Next, we need to mention the Denver Nuggets. While we already talked about how the Lakers beat them last year, they have a very young team and can get better by purely developing their young talent further. The Nuggets have the potential to be a dominant team in the league for the next 5 or more years, with young players like Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, Michael Porter Jr., Bol Bol, and Monte Morris all being 25 years old or younger. And while they did lose Jeremy Grant, who I think was a huge part of their team last year, they do have the talent to replace him with. All of those young guys are only getting better each year, and they already made it to the Western Conference Finals with all of that young talent. It's hard to believe that they won't continue to just get better, and that is the main argument they have as a real threat to the Laker team. And although losing Jeremy Grant will hurt, they did add a good player in JaMychal Green, drafted another good young player in RJ Hampton, brought back PJ Dozier, Paul Millsap, and will get a healthy Will Barton back too, who they didn't have in the NBA bubble. And when you combine all of that with having a good coach in Mike Malone, who I think will continue to make the most of the young talent he has on the team, Denver can be a legitimate threat to beat anyone this year again. For our final threat in the Western Conference, we need to mention the Clippers. Yeah, we do love to make fun of them for blowing a 3-1 lead and not even making it to the conference finals after all of their big talk, but they still can't be underestimated. They still arguably have 2 of the top 15 players in the league with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and they still have a very good team overall. They did lose a few key players, but they did manage to bring in Serge Ibaka, who I think was a really big addition for them. They really got exposed by Denver due to their lack of rim protection and ability to defend a versatile big man like Nikola Jokic, but with the addition of Ibaka, I think they really did a good job addressing that problem, and they did while being able to bring back another key player for them in Marcus Morris. They really prioritize having a floor spacing team around Kawhi and Paul George, so keeping him, along with adding Ibaka, was key to doing that. A big part of the reason for doing that is to match up with the Lakers as well. They really didn't have, and I still don't think they have a perfect player to match up with Anthony Davis and the height that the Lakers often have on the floor. And their way to mitigate that is to have a lot of three-point shooting on the floor to try and force the Lakers to have to play more towards their style of play. That was kind of how their team was developed, but unfortunately for them, they didn't take into consideration any other teams than the Lakers. That fatal mistake wasted a year for them, but even after being a huge disappointment last year, we have to consider them being a real threat again this year. But now, we'll move on to briefly looking at two teams who I believe to be the biggest threats coming out of the East. And although the East hasn't been on the same level as the West lately, they really will be a lot tougher this year. And one team I consider to be a real threat is one that they have already played, and that is the Miami Heat. I feel like it would be disrespectful to not acknowledge them after how well they proved to be last year, and they did it with a lot of young talent too. Talent that has the potential to further develop and make them even better, even though they didn't add any big names in free agency. Both Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo are both only 20 and 23 years old respectively, and it would be arrogant to think that they won't continue to get better. They both have a ton of potential and seem to be perfect fits with Jimmy Butler, and you can't ignore how deep of a team they have either. When they're healthy, they have great role players in Goran Dragic, Duncan Robinson, Andre Iguodala, Kendrick Nunn, Myers Leonard, and two underrated new additions in Avery Bradley and Mo Harkless. And while losing Jay Crowder might hurt them, I don't think they got enough credit for bringing in Avery Bradley and Mo Harkless for cheap. Both of them are great defenders and I think will be great fits on a team that is already known for defense. They are a legitimate 12-deep team and have a lot of players who could lead them on any given night. Everyone underestimated them last year, and I think it would be dumb to do that again. They are a threat again whether you want to believe it or not. But finally, the last team I consider to be a real threat right now is the Brooklyn Nets. This one is pretty obvious, as a team with a healthy Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving can't be ignored. And then when you realize they were competitive even without either of them playing, that makes them a lot more dangerous. Even though they haven't even all played a real game together yet, I consider them to be the favorites to come out of the East. They have so much talent at every position, it's hard not to believe that they aren't the favorites. Karis LeVert, Dinwiddie, DeAndre Jordan, Jared Allen, Joe Harris, and Taurean Prince among others are great role players that can't be ignored. They have one of the deepest teams in the league. I think that will really help to keep Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving healthy all year long. And if Kevin Durant and Kyrie can't stay healthy all year long and play at the level each of them played at in the past, Brooklyn will likely be the biggest threat of all. They have a great team that is very versatile as well. They can beat you in a lot of ways and they are hard to game plan against. I truly think they have the potential to meet up with the Lakers in the NBA Finals and give them a very tough challenge. But what do you guys think? Who do you believe is the biggest threat to the Lakers in the NBA right now? Is it a team that I mentioned, or do you think it is a team that I left out? Let me know by commenting down below and we can talk about it there. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you to everyone who watched until the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please remember to drop a like on the video and to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And as always, thank you for watching and have a great day.